Hey everyone, this is Mike Shaw with Planit for Photographers. Today we're going to talk about the focal length tool. The focal length tool is one of the most useful tools in the Planit app, and it's also the first tool that's actually related to photographers. Now to activate it, just tap on the mode button right down here, and then you'll see these 6 new buttons. Each of these 6 buttons represents a different tool. The focal length tool is the third one right just here. Now you can also access the focal length tool from the hamburger menu up here from the map. Just tap right up here and then select photography tools. You'll then see the same 6 tools, and you can also select the focal length tool right just here. Alright, once you've selected and activated the focal length tool, you'll then see a green fan on the map extending outwards from the center of the map. The width of the fan shows the angle of view, or the field of view, of the selected focal length lens, which you can see here to be set to 28 millimeters. Now, before doing any more explanations, let's simplify our view simply by turning off the ephemeris feature, since the focal length tool really doesn't have anything to do with it. And we do that just by swiping down and turning it off right just down here. Now, let's also load up the New York marker file that we saved from our previous video tutorial on markers, just like this. Okay, from here we can see 2 markers for the camera location. Let's pick this one to select it, and we'll set that as the camera location like this. Now our scene is the One World Trade Center building right here across the Hudson River. So let's add our scene location pin to it like this. And now we've done that, we can drag the green fan around so that it points right at the One World Trade Center building. Okay, so now we've set our camera location and we've aimed our camera at our subject building across the river. Let's see how to use the focal length tool. And notice here that we have a 28 millimeter focal length lens, by the way. You'll see how to change this shortly. Now, first of all, you can see how you can drag the green fan around simply by pressing on the center and dragging it like this. And what this does, it has the same effect exactly as if you're standing on location with your camera and you simply pan or rotate to your left or right to vary the composition just from pointing in different directions. Now, see when I drag either side of the fan like this to make the overall fan wider or narrower, what this does is it changes the focal length value along with it, as you can see right here. And not surprisingly, a narrower fan corresponds to a longer focal length lens, and a wider fan corresponds to a shorter focal length lens. And now you can see why a wide angle lens has that name. Exactly, a wide angle lens has a wide field of view angle. I guess I don't know why telephoto lenses aren't called narrow angle lenses. I guess that just doesn't sound all that great. But anyway, the bottom line is that the angle of view of your composition is directly related to the focal length of your lens. Okay, so let's see an example from this location. Suppose we want to shoot not only the One World Trade Center building, but all the skyscrapers on the far side of the river. On the left side of the composition, we probably want to include part of the Manhattan skyline. On the right-hand side, part of the river. So what we find as we drag the fan around and adjust its width is we end up with a focal length that you can see right here, which is fairly short and on the wide angle side of things, right around 14 to 16 millimeters. Now in the past, you'd have to look this information up on a table or calculate it yourself. It's so much easier just to find it out simply with the app. And also you can tap right here to select a specific focal length that you might want to use. So for example, we can select 17 millimeters like this, and then we can check to see if this focal length will include everything we want to include in the composition simply by looking at the map and making sure everything's covered up by the green fan. That looks okay. Now on the other hand, let's suppose you're thinking of just bringing your 24 millimeter lens and you want to know if the skyline and river will fit in its field of view. So easy, we'll just select the 24 millimeter option from the focal length list like this, and you can check to see what the composition looks like over here on the map. Now in this case, the composition's a little tight for the 24 millimeter lens, so you might want to save yourself the effort and bring a wider lens so you don't have to come back. And finally, you can even compare the effects of portrait or landscape orientations by tapping this button right just here. You can see the effects. You can see how the field of view for both orientations can be seen on the map, and we're going to want to use a landscape orientation here. Now, here's a quick hint. Everything covered up or underneath the green fan is inactive and can't be clicked on. For example, I can't tap the One World Trade Center marker anymore. How to solve this? It's real easy. Just temporarily switch to the first tool like this down here by tapping on the mode button and selecting the first one, and that hides the green fan. And then you can select the One World Trade Center marker and anything else. And once you're done, you can switch back to the focal length tool like this. Anyway, this quick hint will be useful when you're using the app. So let's go to a few more tips. Note here that you can tap on the azimuth value, and when you do that, you can directly enter another value like this. And you can also tap on the scene button down here to automatically make the green fan point to the scene marker over on the One World Trade Center building. After doing so, you can now see the scene marker line up with the center of the green fan on the map. And you can do the same thing with the elevation angle right just here, which you can then tap to enter a specific value like this. Okay, now as you've already seen, you can choose any focal length you want by tapping over here where you get this list. Now we don't show every single focal length option because there's just too many of them, and instead we only list the most commonly used ones with logical increments. For example, after 75 millimeters, we have 85 millimeters with nothing in between. And so on as we increase the focal length. After 500 millimeters, the increment becomes 100 millimeters or more, all the way down to the longest focal length shown, which is 3,000 millimeters. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use a focal length that's not listed. If you see the button down here, it's labeled Enter a Value. You can tap it and then enter whatever focal length you want to use. For example, let's suppose we wanted to use a 128 millimeter lens just like this. Now you can see that once you've done that, you can then check the corresponding horizontal angle of view for this focal length of 128 millimeters by tapping on the second button like this. And then you see the value 16.009 degrees. That's pretty precise. How about the vertical direction? No problem. Simply tap here and you get the value shown here a little over 10.7 degrees. That's pretty cool, huh? Or suppose we want to do this a little differently. Let's say we know that we have a particular angle of view that we want, let's say from an astronomy program, where, for example, we need a specific angle to include a specific set of constellations. So you can also enter that value for the angle directly. For example, let's say we go with 55 degrees for the vertical direction. And we can now check the corresponding angle of view for the horizontal direction, or even the focal length, which is right around 24 millimeters. This is such a useful tool for this type of conversion. Okay, so now I want to show you my favorite part. When we talk about the focal length tool, we have to mention the viewfinder simulation feature. So let's go through a quick demo for that. First of all, tap the mode button down here, and now select the viewfinder (VR) button right just here, which is at the bottom of the list. Boom! Check out this. This is a simulated view. You can see the markers we've added last time to show the One World Trade Center building and its antenna. Isn't that something? This feature can save you an enormous amount of time and effort. You can literally travel virtually all over the area to precisely line up the exact scene that you want. And by the way, you can see here using 24 millimeters can easily include the whole building in the composition. Now, right about now, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, we have a river in the foreground. That means there could be a really cool reflection, especially at night. So if we want to include both the One World Trade Center building and its reflection, it's going to be a little tight using a 24 millimeter lens and a landscape orientation. As you can see here, the top of the building gets a little close to the top of the composition. No problem. We switch to a portrait orientation like this and see the difference. Now it looks a lot better. And you can drag the vertical scale like this so the 0 degree elevation angle is right at the center just to be sure. And although we didn't draw in the reflection, you can easily imagine it's right just here so that the composition includes both the One World Trade Center building and the reflection. Now let's suppose you still want to go back to the landscape orientation. Well, in that case, we're going to need to go to a wider focal length lens, and which you now know how to check like this, for example, 16 millimeters. And as you can see here, a 16 millimeter lens with a landscape orientation works perfectly. It includes both the tower and the reflection as well. So as you can see, you can use the focal length tool on the map to line up the perfect shot. And you can also use this creative virtual viewfinder feature to simulate the scene of your choosing. You can create markers for buildings, mountains, all kinds of landscape features, all of which you can then see in the VR viewfinder. This capability makes planning super easy and tons of fun. Well, look, that's it for the focal length tool. Until next time, this is Mike Shaw saying thanks for watching and best of luck planning with Planit.